energy doesn't lie. Before a single word is spoken, before any confrontation or conversation, the shift is felt. It's in the way your responses slow down, in the way your laughter doesn't come as easily, in the way your presence becomes a little less engaged. And he feels it. Maybe not immediately, maybe not consciously, but deep down, something inside him registers the change. People are more intuitive than they realize. They may not always know what's wrong, but they can sense when something is off. And when a man realizes you've lost interest, his reaction isn't just about you, it's about him. It's about how he sees himself, how he processes emotions, how he responds to challenge and uncertainty. His reaction reveals his depth, his character, and his emotional intelligence. Some men react with fear. They feel the distance growing, and instead of facing it with maturity, they panic. They become anxious. They start overanalyzing every interaction. They try to regain control in ways that may feel desperate or even manipulative. Suddenly, they're texting more, calling more, making promises, trying to be what they think you want. But is it real? Or is it just fear of losing what was once certain? Fear-based reactions don't lead to lasting change. They lead to temporary adjustments, and the moment the fear subsides, old patterns return. Other men react with anger. They don't like the feeling of losing attention, of being the one left behind, so they lash out. Maybe they accuse you of playing games. Maybe they get defensive. Maybe they tell you that you're overreacting, that you're imagining things, that nothing has changed. They shift blame. They make it about you rather than taking responsibility for whatever led to this moment. And then there are the ones who retreat. They feel the shift, and instead of stepping up, they withdraw. They go quiet. They let you go without a fight, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to express what they're feeling. Their silence speaks of insecurity, of avoidance, of a fear of facing hard truths. And that, too, tells you everything. But then there's another kind of man. The rare kind. The one who senses the change and doesn't react with panic or anger or avoidance. Instead, he pauses. He reflects. He asks himself, what has shifted? What have I done or not done to create this distance? And most importantly, he takes ownership. He steps up. Not because he's afraid to lose you, but because he values what you bring to his life and wants to understand where things went wrong. That's the man who's capable of growth. That's the man who doesn't just want to keep you, but wants to be better for himself and for the relationship. Because here's the truth. How a man reacts when he realizes you've lost interest isn't about you at all. It's about him. It's about his level of emotional maturity, his ability to self-reflect, his willingness to take responsibility. And in that moment, you see him clearly, not the version he tries to present, but the truth of who he really is. So pay attention. Not to the words, not to the excuses, not to the promises. Pay attention to the energy, to the action, to the level of self-awareness he brings to the situation. Because that reaction, that tells you everything you need to know. A man's reaction in the moment he realizes you've lost interest is not just a response, it's a revelation. It exposes his emotional intelligence, his confidence, and his true character. When things are good, it's easy to present the best version of oneself. But when the dynamic shifts, when he feels the emotional distance growing, his raw, unfiltered self emerges. That's when you truly see who he is. Some men take it personally. Instead of pausing to understand why the shift happened, they immediately internalize it as rejection. Their ego flares up, and suddenly it's not about the connection or the relationship. It's about them. They might try to guilt trip you, asking questions like, what did I do wrong? Or why are you acting different? But they're not really looking for answers. They're looking for reassurance, for validation, for a way to regain the upper hand. The focus isn't on your feelings, your needs, or what led to this change. It's on their own discomfort. Then there are those who lash out. Anger becomes their shield against vulnerability. They sense the shift, but instead of processing it maturely, they get defensive. Maybe they try to flip the situation on you, making you seem like the one who's acting out. They say things like, "You're being dramatic," or "You always do this." They refuse to acknowledge their role in what's happening, instead choosing to project their insecurities onto you. And that reaction, it's not about love, it's about control. It's about the fear of losing something they assumed was guaranteed. Others will act indifferent. They pretend not to notice, acting as if everything is fine, even when the energy between you has completely changed. They avoid the conversation, hoping that if they don't acknowledge the problem, it will go away. This isn't strength. It's avoidance. And a man who avoids discomfort, who runs from tough conversations, is a man who lacks the emotional depth needed for a healthy relationship. His silence, his lack of effort, his unwillingness to engage, that's his answer. But then there's a different kind of man, the one who chooses growth. He feels the shift, and instead of reacting impulsively, he takes a step back to reflect. He doesn't rush to blame, doesn't panic, doesn't try to manipulate the situation to his advantage. Instead, he asks himself, what changed? Have I been showing up the way I should? Have I taken her for granted? He looks inward before looking outward, recognizing that your loss of interest isn't random, it's a response to something real. This kind of man doesn't try to convince you with words. He doesn't make empty promises or grand gestures out of desperation. He chooses to listen. He wants to understand, not because he's afraid of losing you, but because he genuinely cares about how you feel. And even if things don't work out, even if you decide to move on, he walks away with a lesson. He grows from it. How a man reacts in this moment isn't just about the relationship, it's about who he is as a person. Some will try to manipulate, some will retreat, and some will rise to the challenge. And that reaction tells you everything you need to know, because the right man, he won't wait until he's losing you to start valuing you. He will show up consistently every single day. When a man realizes you've lost interest, it can serve as a powerful wake-up call. For some, it's the first time they truly recognize the impact of their actions or lack thereof. When things are comfortable, when everything feels secure, people tend to take things for granted. They assume what's there will always be there. But when that energy shifts, when the presence they were so used to starts fading, reality hits. And in that moment, a choice has to be made. Some men react with immediate panic. They go into damage control mode, doing anything and everything to pull you back in. Maybe they suddenly start showering you with attention, sending long messages about how much you mean to them, or making last-minute promises to change. But here's the question, if they truly valued you, why did it take losing you to make them act? Why wasn't that effort there when it mattered? A genuine shift in behavior doesn't come from fear of losing someone, it comes from real self-awareness and personal growth. Others feel regret, but they don't know how to express it. Instead of stepping up, they sit in their emotions, replaying everything in their minds, but failing to take action. They might start reminiscing about the good times, bringing up old memories, subtly trying to remind you of what once was. But nostalgia isn't enough to rebuild interest. What's needed isn't a reminder of the past, it's a demonstration of change in the present. Then there are those who don't react at all. They sense the shift, but convince themselves it's not real, or they don't want to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth. They brush it off, pretending nothing has changed, hoping that if they ignore it, things will go back to normal. But silence is a response. Indifference is a choice. If someone doesn't fight for what's important to them, that says everything about their level of commitment. The most valuable reaction, however, is the man who takes accountability. He doesn't just notice the change, he actively seeks to understand it. He asks himself hard questions, not to manipulate you into staying, but because he genuinely wants to improve. He doesn't just say he's sorry, he reflects on what led to this moment. Maybe he realizes he stopped appreciating the little things. Maybe he sees that he became complacent, assuming your presence without truly earning it every day. Instead of reacting out of fear, he responds with responsibility. That's the difference between someone who just wants to keep you and someone who actually values you. Losing interest isn't always about one major event. Sometimes it's a slow drift, a series of small moments where you felt unseen, unheard, or undervalued. And when a man finally realizes that shift, it's an opportunity for him to show who he really is. Will he grow from it? Will he take responsibility? Or will he let his ego lead? At the end of the day, how he reacts is not about you, it's about him. It's about his emotional maturity, his self-awareness, and his willingness to step up. Whether he fights for the connection or walks away without a word, his reaction speaks volumes. And for you, that moment is just as powerful. Because when you stop settling for less than what you deserve, you make room for something greater. Whether that's a better version of him or a better path for yourself, you must stand firm in your worth. When you lose interest in someone, it's not random. It's not something that just happens without reason. It's a response to being unfulfilled, to feeling unseen, unheard, or undervalued. And yet, when a man realizes you've lost interest, one of the first things he might try to do is make you question yourself. He might act surprised, as if he never saw it coming. He might ask why, over and over again, as if the signs weren't there all along. But here's the truth. Deep down, he knows. He knows when he stopped putting in effort. He knows when he became complacent, when he let the relationship run on autopilot, when he assumed you would always be there no matter what. And now that your energy is shifted, he's faced with something he didn't expect. Consequences. The moment you start pulling away, you're testing his ability to step up. And that's when you see the real difference between someone who values you and someone who simply fears losing you. A man who values you doesn't wait until you're done to start trying. He shows up consistently, not just when it benefits him. But a man who only fears losing you, he reacts with urgency, not because he suddenly understands your worth, but because he doesn't want to feel the discomfort of losing something he thought was secure. This is why standing firm in your worth is so important. Because when you begin to lose interest, it's not an invitation for negotiation. It's not about waiting for him to finally step up and prove himself. If he wasn't showing up before, what makes you think he'll sustain the effort now? Change that comes from desperation is not real change. It's a reaction. And reactions fade. Some men will try to convince you that you're overthinking, that your expectations are too high, that you're asking for too much. But the truth is, the right person will never make you feel like loving you is a chore. You don't have to beg for consistency. You don't have to remind someone how to treat you. The person who is truly meant for you will never need to lose you to realize your value. The biggest mistake you can make in this moment is to second guess yourself. To wonder if you're being too harsh, too quick to walk away. But here's the thing. Losing interest is not something you decide, it's something you feel. It's your intuition telling you that something isn't right. And if you ignore that, if you let guilt or nostalgia pull you back in, you're only delaying the inevitable. A man who truly wants to be with you will recognize when he's falling short, and he won't need to lose you to fix it. He will make an effort, not because he's afraid of losing you, but because he genuinely values what you bring into his life. And if he doesn't, if he lets you go without a fight, without real self-reflection, without any attempt to grow, then you have your answer. So stand firm. Don't shrink yourself to fit into a place you've already outgrown. Don't stay where you feel like an option, because the right relationship, the right connection, will never require you to convince someone to show up. You deserve more than last-minute effort. You deserve to be chosen fully and completely every single day. Focus on growth, not guilt. It's easy to second-guess yourself when you lose interest in someone, especially if they suddenly start making an effort. Maybe they begin texting more, trying harder, saying all the things you once wanted to hear. And for a moment you wonder, am I making a mistake? Should I give them another chance? But here's the truth. You lost interest for a reason, and that reason didn't just disappear because they finally realized they might lose you. Growth means trusting yourself enough to walk away from what no longer fulfills you. It means recognizing that love isn't just about effort in moments of crisis. It's about consistency over time. If someone only steps up when they're afraid of losing you, that's not love, that's fear. And fear-based actions are temporary. They last just long enough to convince you to stay, but the moment things feel safe again, the old patterns return. Guilt, on the other hand, keeps you stuck. It makes you question yourself, as if walking away means you're the one who failed. But here's something important. You are not responsible for someone else's growth. If a man only realizes what he had once it's slipping away, that's his lesson to learn, not your burden to carry. It's not your job to stay and see if he'll change. It's not your responsibility to wait while he figures out what he should have been doing all along. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are not heartless for outgrowing a situation that no longer serves you. The right connection will never make you feel guilty for having standards. And if walking away makes someone realize what they lost, that's not a sign to go back. That's a sign that they weren't truly present when it mattered. The truth is, relationships are not built in moments of panic. They are built in the day-to-day, in the way someone shows up for you without being asked. So when you lose interest, when you start to feel that pull away, ask yourself, is this because something is missing? Is this because my needs haven't been met? And if the answer is yes, don't let guilt keep you tied to something that no longer aligns with your growth. A man's reaction when he realizes you've lost interest will tell you everything you need to know. Some will chase, not because they truly want to be better, but because they fear losing control. Some will lash out, blaming you instead of taking responsibility. Some will withdraw, unable to process the loss. And some, very few, will actually reflect. They will recognize where they went wrong, not just to win you back, but because they genuinely want to be better for themselves as much as for you. But regardless of how he reacts, your focus should remain the same: growth, not guilt. Keep moving forward, keep trusting yourself, keep choosing what feels right. You are not here to teach someone how to value you. You are here to be valued from the start. And when you hold yourself to that standard, when you refuse to settle for anything less, the right connection will find you. One that doesn't need loss to inspire effort, one that doesn't need fear to ignite appreciation. So don't look back. Don't question yourself. Don't let temporary guilt outweigh long-term happiness. Growth is about moving toward what fulfills you, not clinging to what once felt familiar. You owe it to yourself to keep growing, to keep rising, to keep choosing what aligns with your worth. And when you do, you won't have to wonder if you made the right choice. You'll know.